Hi felters and welcome. In this video I'm going to run over needle felting commonly used terms to help you understand needle felting and the whole process of it a lot quicker. Let's get started. So my name is Philippa, I'm a needle felting artist. I've been doing this for about 7 years. So I thought I would create this video just to help you with needle felting terms because there's so many words when you first start. So first off, we're going to go through wool, which I have got lots of separate videos on all of these topics I'm going to cover that I will list at the end. So fleece or raw wool, that is wool that comes straight off the sheep shorn. It is not washed. It is normally in its natural unprocessed form. Lanolin, this is the natural grease that is found in a sheep's fleece. You don't get it in alpacas. And this is something that you'll probably want to wash out or to have less of if you were to process a whole sheep's fleece. Vegetable matter, this is hay, straw, plants, poo, anything that the sheep might come in contact with in the field that would be caught in the fleece. Skirting, so we're sort of going through what happens to a sheep's fleece in order to end up for the wool that you would use for needle felting. Once the fleece is shorn off the sheep, then they will go round and skirt it, so they'll pull out the large vegetable matter. You will never get rid of all vegetable matter in wools, but by the time it gets to you, it's been washed quite a few times. And they will remove the dirty areas from underneath the fleece and obviously around the back end. Scouring, this is the process of washing the fleece and removing the dirt and the lanolin, and there can be several stages of washing depending on the fleece and how dirty it is. Now I am going to mention these two really briefly. Staple length is the length of a single piece of wool that the wool grows to on the sheep. Don't panic too much about it. And then micron is the thickness of that single piece of wool, which does determine how easy or hard it is to needle felt. So staple length and micron, it's just good to be aware of those words. Micron is the one you might see labelled beside some wool that you want to buy, and it might say 20 to 30 microns or 25 microns, and that's the thickness. So anything that's sort of 30 to 35 is quite thick, and anything that's really fine wool is going to be down to the sort of 18 to 25. That's a really fine wool. Just to mention as well, sheep breeds. You're going to hear a lot of sheep breed names. So there's Merino, Corriedale, Shetland, Dorset Horn, Cheviot, Icelandic, Bergschaft. There are hundreds of sheep breeds, and we take the fleeces from them and process the wool. However, the one that we hear a lot, which kind of confuses people, is Merino. So Merino is just a sheep breed from Australia, from hotter countries. But quite often it's labelled Merino wool, which doesn't really tell you the form of the wool. Normally it's in tops, which we'll cover in a minute. So that's the one you'll hear a lot, is Merino wool. But it is just a sheep breed. But there are hundreds. I use Corriedale an awful lot, and Merino wool and Shetland. Those are my sort of main ones. So once the wool has the vegetable matter removed and it's been washed, so it's been cleaned as much as possible, it then goes through the carding machine, which in the mills are great big massive machines, and it starts the combing process. And from that carding machine you will get huge carded bats. So these are big flat bits of it's sort of the first process of combing the wool. And you can buy wool in carded bats, which is normally a bit too much wool for most beginners, but here's one just to show you the size of it from World of Wool, where I get most of my wool. So this gives us carded wool, which is a phrase that you will hear, and personally I think it's the best wool to work with. It's mixed up in all directions, it pulls apart really easy, it's great for needle felting, it felts up quite quickly, and it's easy to combine, like if you're adding legs and you don't get lots of join marks. So carded wool is fantastic. And then this big bat gets broken down into carded slithers or slithers. You can say it either way, it does not matter. And this is a smaller rope-like form of carded wool, and you can pull off the amount you want. You can buy it in smaller amounts. It's great for wrapping around armature or creating things. So the majority of the wool I buy is in carded slithers. Wool comes in natural colours, and then it is dyed or processed in order to create all the wonderful colours that we see. And if you're after a true white colour, you don't get a naturally really white sheep fleece. They will probably bleach it. Most natural colours that are in the sort of white range are slightly cream. They're not too bad, but if you want that snow white, it's probably going to have been bleached. So the next form of processing is combing it out fully, and it's called tops. So tops is where the wool is going in all one direction, and it quite simply looks like hair. And you have to hold your hands further apart to pull it apart, whereas carded wool you can just sort of hold and pull apart easily. It comes in one colour, its own colour, or they blend it with other colours, and you get the most fantastic range of colours. It's fantastic. Tops is great for creating long coats. You can work with it as a top coat. It just takes a lot longer to felt, and I personally would self card it myself. So you mix it up between your fingers, or we use carders, which are two wooden brushes traditionally, but also dog brushes you can use, and you just put the wool on and you'd run each brush over the other one, and that will mix up the wool for you. You can hand card things as well, just between your hands. And if you were to, normally you'd use carders to blend two colours together to get the colour that you want. Say that you had two blues and that you didn't get the exact blue, you might put them together, and then that would create the colour that you actually want. Just to mention in here with tops, you will also hear the word roving. I think it is more of an American term, roving, although I have seen it used over here with some factories. It's more like the wool is in tops form, so in long strands, and quite often the roving that I have seen is quite thick, quite coarse wool. So you've got carded wool or carded bats or slithers, tops, and roving. Just to cover the animals that you can get wool from as well. So you've got lots of different sheep breeds. So you can get wool from sheep, alpacas, Angora rabbits, Angora goats, camels, yak. People have used dog hair. I don't know if people have used cat hair. Probably they've tried it. Horse hair. The tail and mane are very coarse. It's very difficult. You just normally add them into the mane and tail of your actual creation. But yeah, so there's lots of different wools out there. Then you can get vegan wools from bamboo, rose, hemp. There's all sorts of different types. So if you are vegan, there's definitely wools that you can use. And then there's synthetic wools, nylon and bio-nylon, so it is degradable. Just one other wool name to mention, Angelina, which is a sparkly wool. And there's two different types. There's one that you can apply heat to and it will stick to each other. So that's what Angelina wool is. Locks. This is the natural wool off the sheep, which has literally been shorn off, and you keep the locks as they are. Some sheep have really lovely curly locks or wavy locks, and you want to keep it that way. So you wash that part of, I buy a fleece and then I wash sections of it, and then I dry it, and then I cut those locks off and use them. So I've got a big sheep up the top there. He's called Vincent. He's made from actual sheep locks, and I'll show you a couple of other examples. If you go on Etsy, you'll find if you search curly locks, quite a few people will pre-prepare them into small sections for you. But the cheapest way to do it is to buy a whole fleece and wash it, but it's quite a lot of work. So that's locks. Core wool. This is a cheaper wool that you can use on the inside of your project so as not to waste money. Sometimes it's a little bit lumpier, sometimes it's a little bit coarser. There might be a reason why it is a core wool, but hopefully if it felts up quite fast, you can save yourself a little bit of money. When you go onto any of the shops that you look at, they should have a core wool. Like World of Wool has lots of different types of core wool, so it can save you a bit of money. A rolag or an art bat. This is a very colourful bat of wool that's been hand blended by somebody, and normally it's used for spinning. It can have carded or tops in it. They're normally really pretty and beautiful. You can use them as bases for 2D pictures, but like I said, a lot of people use them for spinning. Teasing, that's when you gently pull the wool apart with your hands. Carded wool comes apart easily. Tops, if it's in its rope-like form, you have to move your hands further apart and gently pull. If you had your hands there, it doesn't, because the length of the wool could be about that long. You're trying to break the wool, and that doesn't work. So you move your hands further apart, and then it will just ease apart gently. I'm just going to cover wet felting, because I heard the phrase when I first started needle felting. I was like, what's wet felting? So you've got wet felting and dry or needle felting, which is what I do primarily. Wet felting is you take the same wools that you use for needle felting. Quite often it's normally tops and sort of the silks and the merinos, and you place them down and you add some soap and water and agitation, and you rub it with your hands, and there's equipment you can buy just to help you sort of rub it, and it will felt together. This has been something that people have done for centuries. You can make clothes out of it, 2D pictures, hats. You can make bowl sculptures or vases, so you can make sort of round things as well, bags. You know, wet felting is a huge another area of things to look at, and it's really great, and I've sort of dabbled in it. This picture here, I've wet felted the base, and then we embroidered over the top. That's something I learnt about recently. So wet felting is fantastic. You know, you should give it a go if you like working with wool. And then what I do is dry, or it's normally called needle felting, and you're using a needle, so that's why it's needle felting. You can do 2D flat pictures, so I do quite a few flat pictures, and then I will put sort of 3D bits coming out of them. And then most of the time what I do is 3D sculpture with needle felting, so that's making a form in a 3D shape, whatever that may be, and you can do anything. And it's like sculpting with clay but without the mess. That's how I feel. You can add bits here or there and make something bigger, and you can just sculpt a piece. It's absolutely brilliant and fascinating. And then I was going to cover felt and pre-felt. So especially when you do the base of a picture, a lot of people will use felt, which is a fully felted, normally 100% wool piece. It's quite thick and it will hold together, but a needle will go through it, so you felt onto that. And then pre-felt is slightly more stretchy, and it's less felted basically, so you could still pull it apart. You could use it as features in pictures, you can use it as ears for sheep. If you only had pre-felt, I'd probably put 2 bases down if you were doing it as the base of a picture. So that is felt and pre-felt. You'll hear those words every now and again. Next, we're going to move on to needles, and needles are spoken about with gauges. So G, they'll have a 40G. A gauge is the thickness of the needle. That's all it refers to. So a 32G is very thick, and a 42G is a lot finer, a lot thinner. Then you'll look at shape, and you've got a triangular needle, which the actual shaft is shaped in a triangle. Then you've got spiral, and you can literally see the spiral. Then you've got star, and it goes in, out, down. It's like a cross. It's like all the sides are inverted. And then you've got a reverse needle as well, which does exactly what it says. Instead of pushing the wool in, it pulls the wool out, which is great for creating certain effects. Most of the time you're probably just going to need a 38 and a 40 triangular needle. Don't get too panicked or too, try other needles. I love the spiral needle. The star is very good for some felters. It's quite firm, it's quite a strong one. And then on the needles, so you've got the gauge, you've got the shape, and then you just have the barbs are the little notches that do the work on the needles. And most needles have the same amount of barbs, apart from 1 or 2 very specialist needles which have barbs right down the end. So don't worry too much about the barbs, but shape, try the triangular and the spiral if you're a beginner. They're probably the ones you're going to like and use the most. Armature. This is just the wire that people put on the inside of 3D sculptures in order to help them stand up. And you can do like just plain wire, and then you can add pipe cleaners around it, or you can add a tape around it just so that it helps the wool stick, or a bit of glue on it. An awl, or an awl, however you like to say it. I always say it wrong. It's AWL. This is a little wooden tool that just helps you make eye holes, or helps you make holes to, if you were to attach a leg and you wanted to insert some wire in. You can use scissors in the first instant, but an awl is really much better. It really helps. Multi-needle tool is exactly as it sounds. It holds anything from 2 to 8 needles to try and speed up your work. Planting wool is a phrase you might hear. This is trying to create long hair coats where you just felt through the middle of the wool, fold it over. There's all sorts of different ways of planting wool, but it's making a nice sort of long-haired coat effect. The mats, so you will have a foam mat, you will have a burlap rice field mat, you could have felt stuffed with wool, and then you can have a wool mat. So there's lots of different types, but they're all types of mats to have underneath, basically ranging in price. Foam mat is your cheapest, and then a wool mat. So foam mats are probably about £3 or £4. Wool mats are easily £20 to £30, but will last you a long time. Finger guards, exactly what they say they are. They go on your fingers so you don't stab yourself. Then you might hear about glues that people use to attach eyes. I just use a general all-purpose glue on the back of my little eyes, and the eyes have a little post behind them, and you create a hole and pop it in. So any type of glue might be needed for that. And then people also use clays, like a Fimo clay, a silk clay, in order to create noses or hooves. So you might hear people talk about that. And then lastly, pliers in order to cut wire. Really helpful. So definitely get a pair of pliers. They're not too much. So I've covered most general terms as quickly as possible. The more you hear them, the more you'll start to understand needle felting. But personally, all you need to really remember is carded wool, carded bats, bat or batting it's sometimes called in America. And I would probably just stick with a 36 and a 38 triangular and a 40 if you want to, and away you go. Those are your sort of basic things you're going to need to start. I hope that's helped. Any questions, pop them below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.